The three-day summit of leading emerging companies known as the Brics, which ended Thursday in South Africa. The high-profile meeting focused on a number of areas, including trade, new membership, support for host countries, flagging power sector, as well as other sideline events hosted by the Brics Business Forum. Let's bring on Peter Major, the Director of Mining at Mergence Corporate Solutions, to discuss the future forward of the Brics Summit. Peter joins me tonight from beautiful Idaho in United States. Hey there, my friend. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Boson. It's always great, a privilege to be with you and your team.
I'm sure you're having a nice time over there and you're just tuning on the television and watching the Brics Summit in South Africa. You're based in Cape Town, so you're a mining engineer, you're a mining investment manager over many years. So, but again, when you watch a coalition of big economies such as Brics meeting in South Africa this week, would you say it's a success for the Ramaphosa's administration?
Yes, I think it's definitely a success. The fact that they wanted to hold it in South Africa with all the negative things going on in South Africa shows how desperate they want the Republic of South Africa to be in Brics, to be a major partner in Brics. And we all know whatever the economy is doing in South Africa, it is still a minerals powerhouse. It is a geographic powerhouse. There's been a few United States generals and admirals saying the Republic of South Africa is the world's largest, most important aircraft carrier. And that is true. So even without the minerals, South Africa would be important. But with the minerals and the agriculture, especially the citrus coming out of the Cape, and Africa, South Africa, maybe it's got a rival now called Nigeria as far as economies. They're twins. They're tied on the size and importance of their economies. But South Africa is probably more vital for its minerals and geographic location than even Nigeria is for its oil. So it was a success for South Africa holding this conference.
Okay, so what do you make of the Brics expansion to include geopolitical heavyweights such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and the UAE? By January next year, at least 6 or 7 of the world's largest oil-producing economies will be inside the Brics.
I think that's really important. Most organizations need to grow. Otherwise, they eventually shrink and lose relevance. And people should remember, Brics was a name coined by Goldman Sachs back in the late 90s, early millennium. And the reason they coined that term was to bring attention to the investment community that business as usual in the new millennium is not going to be as usual, that there are growing economies that are going to have a lot of clout, and there's going to be a lot of money and investment returns to be made in those economies. So they were picking out the largest 5 that they thought were going to grow the fastest and were going to have a dominant effect. And they were pretty close. China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa. I'm trying to remember the 5th one off. But those economies, only South Africa really disappointed. South Africa, from the new millennium on, seemed to be on a self-destructive path. They seemed to put in legislation that was not thought through, that worked against economic growth, that worked against developing their resources further and employing people. They've come up with disastrous policies. And Russia now, unfortunately, seems to be following the same path. But China, we know, was growing at double digits. You're lucky to find a company growing at double digits. India didn't grow as fast as China, but it was a powerhouse. And Brazil. So it's a fact of life. They still weren't well enough to challenge what we called the West, even though they were heading that direction. Bringing in the large oil producer like Saudi Arabia definitely makes good sense, I think. United Arab Emirates, maybe Iran, I think that makes good sense. So yes, opening up the membership, people are wondering why didn't Indonesia get in? You know, they're over 220 million people. But I think they will continue to grow. And it could be to South Africa's advantage. It offers an alternative for finance, for investment.
Interesting. But do you think Western economies, US, Europe, should worry about the growing influence of the BRICS coalition? They are growing not just in terms of the number of member countries, but again, in terms of the size of their economies as well as population, if you consider that as well, and in terms of geopolitical position, if you look at Saudi Arabia, Iran, if you look at Egypt, these were key geopolitical powerhouses in terms of holding the hands of the East as well as the West, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. Without a doubt, the West should be concerned. Now, this isn't worried. They shouldn't be worried about a potential World War III. But what they should be worried about is we are going to have competition for investing in Africa in the future. We're going to have competition investing in South America in the future. More competition than we've ever had. Now, that's good for individual countries. It's always good to have 2 banks or 3 banks that can fund you because you keep them honest that way. You never want just one source of funding. Then you're hostage to all their whims, whether they're good or not. You don't want to be hostage to one source. So it'll make for a competitive market, and South Africa is definitely going to benefit from this by being in it. It gives them a lot of alternative sources of funding from the new donors, and it gives them more competitive rates, terms, and conditions from their existing Western funders. So South Africa does seem to realize that because they've broken a lot of traditional Western standards for financing, where the money goes, how it's utilized, how is it accounted for. So the negative side is this probably lets them get away with a lot of bad habits a lot longer before they get brought to account. But it's good news for South Africa in most ways.
But again, what about the rest of Africa? We've got Egypt and Ethiopia now in the mix. So in terms of intra-Africa trade, in terms of infrastructure, and what have you? What would this BRICS expansion mean? Nigeria, which is one of the largest economy and most populous country on the continent, was not invited in, at least for now.
I know. That is a big concern because Nigeria is growing faster than South Africa. It's come from way behind South Africa economy-wise to it's now larger than South Africa. And if I look at the people that Nigeria is churning out, they're churning out more world-class business people, even, dare I say, politicians, dare I say, doctorates. But yeah, why Nigeria wasn't invited, I don't know. And I was surprised to hear that the 5 new countries accepted were invited. Okay, I guess they were probably part of the 22 others that were asking to be invited. It's good news for all of Africa, Boson, and I think Nigeria is going to get invited very soon because they've got a lot to offer the BRICS. They are the dominant player in the northern and central bit of Africa. And all of Africa is going to benefit by this BRICS. As I said earlier, alternative sources of funding, alternative terms and conditions. The negative, I think, though, for the world is a lot of this funding could come at the expense of human rights and long-term development. And we don't want to see that. We want standards applied to who can get the money and what they do with it.
So just to sum it up with you, Peter, do you think this is the beginning of a new world business, economic, financial markets order, or reordering of globalization in the manner of speaking, and everyone is trying to align itself somewhere, somehow? Are we seeing the end of the old order of what we saw at the end of the Second World War with the Bretton Woods institutions? Is this the opening of a new beginning, a new vista?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as dramatic as end of an old order, but it is morphing, changing into a new order. Bretton Woods was set up before World War II was even over. And it held up very well for 20 years. The world needed some stability. They needed to have some standard, the gold price, dollar financing, terms and conditions for getting money to rebuild. And you can see Bretton Woods had a big shock in 1973, almost over 30 years from when it was formed. You could say, oh, that was a new order. Yeah, it was a new order. And OPEC formed. And you could say Brics is a bit like OPEC. But without a doubt, this is probably the biggest change in the new millennium, is this Brics originating and going from 5 countries to 10. It's a big change in the new world order, and we hope it's a positive one. I think it is positive. To be honest, I think it's positive.
Great. So how's the weather treating you out there in Idaho, my friend? What are you doing? Snorkeling, whatever? What is it?
No, I'm in Idaho on business. We have a silver mine that we are developing, a silver lead zinc mine in the world's richest, deepest silver belt, which is northern Idaho. And silver, funny enough, is about the only metal that South Africa doesn't have. I'm very much in tune with South Africa. I'm returning there in a few more weeks. I will be there at least 6 months nonstop, except for some trips to Zambia.
Hope to see you soon. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend that starts right now. Thank you, Peter Major, Director of Mining at Emergence Corporate Solutions.